Hi, everyone. We're going to get our next panel started. So up next, we have a panel that will keep you going. Do the Thing, a panel on perseverance, is presented by the Westport Writers Workshop and features authors who have faced adversity in the publishing industry but have never given up, and the results of their work speak volumes. Please join me in welcoming back to our panel Gabino Ingesias, author of The Devil Takes You Home. May Cobb is also returning, author of My Summer Darlings. And then we also have Rachel Harrison, whose next novel, Such Sharp Teeth, comes out in just a few weeks. Alma Katsu, author of The Fervor. LaRocca, whose collection Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke came out just last week. Olesya Salnikova Gilmore, author of The Witch and the Tsar, which is exclusively available at Storyfest today and is being sold in the bookshop. And our panel today is being moderated by author of Cocktails for Book Lovers and a great friend of the library, Tessa Smith McGovern. So please welcome them all.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. I know it's going to be so exciting. We have such a wealth of information here. I want to go right to the nitty-gritty, to the darkest stuff, to the worst moment in your writing career. What has been the hardest thing or the worst moment? Because this is a panel on perseverance, right? So if I could ask you, Olesya, I'll put you on the spot right away. Worst moment or the hardest thing?
Well, hi, everyone. The worst moment, I think, in writing career was for sure, so I'd written 2 books. So I'll start at the beginning. I actually left law. I was a lawyer for about 4 years, and I realized that it was not the right fit for me. I was miserable, burned out, and I really wanted to be a writer, so I kind of just pursued my dreams. I wrote 1 book, a 2nd book, and they were just not going anywhere. And I think it was at the point that I started writing The Witch and the Tsar that it was the lowest point, because I didn't know if I should keep going. I had written the 2 books. They weren't really going anywhere. I tried to get an agent. It didn't really happen. I said, is this even worth it? I literally left an entire career to do this, and it wasn't working out. And I still remember the conversations I had with my sister, with my family. Should I keep going? And then I had the idea for a Baba Yaga novel, who's the maligned Slavic witch of Slavic folklore. And that just gave me the, I guess, strength to keep going and the passion to keep going, so.
So what did they say to you? Do you remember a phrase that someone said?
Honestly, no. There wasn't one phrase. I think my family just said, you know, we believe in you. You have to keep going. And I thought about quitting, but I think for me, when I had gotten the idea for a Baba Yaga book, I was just so passionate and into it and just fascinated by the subject matter that there wasn't really a question of stopping then.
Okay, cool. Eric?
Hi, everyone. So for me, the worst moment happens weekly, usually, and then it's replaced by a new worst moment. But I mean, it varies. It could be anything from, maybe a publisher reaches out and they seem really interested in your work, and it kind of just fizzles out, doesn't really go anywhere. It can be a bad review where, someone just kind of brings you, the author, into it as opposed to critiquing the work, which isn't really fun. But I don't know, I'm feeling kind of positive today for once.
Okay,
So it just I feel grateful that I'm able to do this and be on a panel with such distinguished people and writers that I admire. But, you know, for like the worst moment, I would just say, like, I mean, we're gonna get into it later, but obviously, like, just keep going. Like, that's all we can do is just keep writing and keep telling stories and know that we'll find our readers eventually.
Right, okay, good, thank you. Alma?
So I've been publishing books for about 12 years now. So there are so many moments to choose from. It's so hard to narrow it down, and I'm sure we'll get into some of them. But probably one of the worst was when I was getting my first book published, which was The Taker. And that was a long time ago. And it took me 10 years to find a publisher for the book, 10 years to write it, to get it to the point where it had been, an offer was made on it. And I was working in intelligence. I was 50 years old when I sold my first book. So yeah, keep at it. And I was working for CIA, and they called me in, and Simon & Schuster had decided they were gonna make it a big book, which means I was going on this cross-country tour, and just crazy. It was like Willy Wonka's golden ticket, right? Like, oh, I'm so lucky, I'm so lucky. And CIA called me in and they said, well, we don't want you to do any of the things they want you to do. We want you to give us 4 days notice for us to approve or deny any reporter you speak to. And I said, you do know this is a book about magic and love, right? It's not a spy book. And they were like, yeah, but when you're still working for the intelligence community, it's different than when you retire and what they can ask of you and what restrictions they can put on you. And I thought about the golden ticket and I said, okay, I resign. And I resigned my career of 22 years. I walked out the next day, had my exit interview, gave them my badge. A spoiler alert, I did actually go back later, but at the time, it really felt like the end of the world, and I was just gonna risk it all on this book.
Wow, wow. Rachel?
So I think the easy answer would probably be the fact my debut came out in March 2020, the first week of lockdown. But there was so much other stuff going on that I didn't really register disappointment or anything. So I really think what Eric said about it's more like on a weekly basis, or just how you're feeling, or if something gets under your skin and makes you doubt yourself. Like for me, that's the hardest part. You know, things beyond my control, I don't really let get to me for the most part, but it's self-doubt. Those are the hard days when you start doubting yourself, and it's not an outside voice, it's your own.
And do you have a strategy for when that pops up, your own self-doubt? What
No.
do you do?
I wish I did.
You must do, because you've got to this point, so.
I think it's more fear-driven, where I just need to keep going. But it's different every time. You know, you figure it out, and, you know, sometimes you have a little cry, and sometimes, you know, go for a run, talk to friends, vent. So I think it depends on each phase. I don't have like a set strategy, or like a mantra. It's very random how I.
Are you a type A personality?
Yes.
Okay, because that's helpful.
Does
if
it
you're
show
type
or
A.
something?
No, but when you said you just make yourself do it, that's I mean, if you have that, it works. So, great.
It's working so far. So we'll see.
Thank you. May?
Yes, I think it's just whatever new fresh hell is being presented this week. But I think what Rachel said about when it's your own self-doubt, like that's the bigger demon to fight. And for me, that probably happened after my debut came out in 2018. Which I'm incredibly proud of, but it was released by a really small press, and they're now bankrupt, but it's what actually got me to Storyfest back then. Thank you, Alex. And so that came out, and I had been staying at home for several years. I have a son who's special needs, and so I was out of the workforce, and all I want to do is be a writer, right? So I was like, wow, the book came out. I bought I paid a few electricity bills with it and stuff, but what am I doing with my life? Like I need to go find a job. So I started applying for jobs, and nobody would call me back or anything. So I'm like, wow, I need like another career. Like I need to maybe be a realtor or a teacher or something. Anyway, long story short, and I was also in the process of changing agents, and so it was this big like crisis of faith. What am I doing? But I told myself, okay, I know I'm getting knocks on the door and eviction notices, but I have this idea and I have to write it. So I spent 4 months doing nothing but that, and thank God it sold. And it went to auction, and it was a happy ending so far. But yeah, that was a real crazy crossroads for me. Like, what am I doing to me and my family? And is this going to work out?
And
I
in
still
that
don't know if it
4
will, but,
months,
yeah.
what did you say to yourself to keep yourself going?
It was actually what my husband said to me, because I would go like, I have writer's block, and he's like, no, you don't. You need to go write something right now. I'm in a plot hole. Nope, you're gonna pull yourself out of that right now. So yeah.
Wow, okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah, it
Okay,
was.
Gabino?
Have you been in publishing? Someone said fresh hell. That's about it. It's like, what's your lowest point in the last 48 hours? No, between 2008 and 2010, I couldn't pay people to publish my work. Between 2010 and 2019, it was, the indie press struggle. And if you're doing this for like the money and fame and power, it's not easy, which is why I do it, and to get to my enemies. But that's another story. It's a different panel. I think between 2008 and 2019 was hard, but then 2020 rolled around. And then there was like 1 week in very early March where I had maybe 1/3 of The Devil Takes You Home written, and I was looking forward to, having like another year to work it out and try to make it work. And then I did a lot of things in 2019, and I kind of thought my career was about to, there's this momentum that you feel, and I thought, if I keep working really hard like I've been doing since 2008, something might happen. And the first probably 9 days of March, I lost my job. I had a tour in France with Sonatine Editions for 5 cities for my novel over there. It was canceled, and I was going to Canada for the first time in my life to the Surrey International Writers Conference to teach some workshops, and that was also canceled. So it was like, you're not going anywhere, you don't have a job, and you don't have a finished book to dig yourself out of the hole. So what are you gonna do now? So between March and October of 2020, the time we don't talk about, it's like, I should just go, and this is how low it got, like, I should just go find a gig, like, frying burgers, like that will pay the bills. Guess what? Even the folks frying burgers were getting, let go. So no one had jobs. It wasn't just me. It was everybody was sad and depressed and scared and jobless. So I think that those 10 days were pretty hard, because you rethink everything. You're like, a decade of work for what? To be here, no job, no money, no friends, no agent, no nothing. And then I didn't develop a mantra either. It's just like out of spite. I keep going out of spite. It's a powerful motor.
Spite. I like that. We could all rustle a bit of that up. So spite against what?
Everyone and everything. When I wasn't the best student in high school, so they told me to aim low and local. And then I was like, screw you, I'm gonna get a PhD from the University of Texas at Austin, just so you have to call me doctor, you idiot. So someone told me, you're never gonna make it as a writer because your name has too many vowels. So you should, write under a nom de plume. So I just keep that in the back of my head, and whenever things get dark, I'm like, I'm gonna prove everybody wrong and screw everything. So spite.
Yeah, I love that.
Hope you're having a lovely day.
Who can you prove wrong?
Yeah.
That's really, I think that's great. So how do you protect your writing time? And please be very specific about this, because we can literally take notes. So Olesya, how do you protect your writing time when there are so many demands?
Yeah, that's really tough, especially since I work from home and I have a 1.5-year-old that's very demanding of my time. So it's been really tough finding the time to write, the time to meet my deadlines, and just life. You know, my mom was helping me out with my kid, and it'd be like every 5 minutes there's a question. Every 5 minutes, you know, she wants to talk to me or tell me a story of what's happening, and I'm like, I'm working. And sometimes I feel like people don't take what we do as a job. It's very much like, oh, she's just, you know, hanging out by herself in her office, just, you know, thinking. And I'm like, this is a job, you know? So I think being very firm with whoever it is to, first of all, plan your time. I think that's the most specific thing you can do, is planning your writing time. When do you write? When do you close that door? And when, you know, without being mean, do you tell people, this is a job, I need to, you know, protect myself, I need to focus. And it doesn't always work because I feel like people sometimes don't understand. But I think just being as firm as you can and talking and educating people, I think, because a lot of, you know, family, friends, they don't really understand what we do. And so I think with my experience, it's been kind of an educational process for my family and kind of understanding that, yeah, this is a job. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it requires focus and closing that door. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is really being, you know, honest with my family in giving me that time. And so, yeah, that's been, yeah, really important.
So one of the things we could, like before you're getting published for your work, that's a different state, right? You have to be able to justify it. So I guess we could think about it as an internship. This is, I'm working. Yes, I'm an intern. I'm not getting paid. I'm publishing in literary magazines, but I'm going to be paid. And if you don't let me do this work, I'm not going to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, 100% what Olesya said. I think there are, at least in my experience, like when I was living with my parents and writing, you know, my mom understood it because she's a very creative person, but my dad just like didn't really understand what I was doing, why I was, you know, sitting in my room all day, like reading or writing. And it just, it changed after Things Have Gotten Worse came out, and it kind of like exploded on the internet and everything. And then my dad was like, oh, that's what he's doing. Like it clicked for him finally when I was getting like, you know, invited to things and events and all that. So now, I mean, we have a very different relationship, which is great. But I think, you know, just to echo what Olesya said, like, you know, finding that time, educating the people in your life, like that it's, not everyone understands what we do, but, you know, we can educate them and, you know, let them know, you know, this is important, this is what we're doing. And just, you know, finding the time to really be creative and write. Like I still have a day job, so I work from home. And, you know, I do my 8:30 to 5:30, and then, you know, that's my work from home time. Sometimes I write like during that, but don't tell anyone. But then after that, you know, I'm free to, you know, write. I don't have much of a life, so maybe that's why I'm able to write.
So just let's stay on that for a minute. How did this go viral? What happened?
It was really TikTok that.
Was it?
Yeah, TikTok really helped it catapult it to like.
So the
viral.
image is not up here. It's a book called Things Have Gotten Worse.
Since we last spoke, the original edition, published by Weird Punk Books, came out in June 2021. And the cover art was by a Swedish artist named Kim Jacobson. And, you know, just I feel like the image that cover was like really drew people in. Also the title, I feel like, a lot of people were
No,
intrigued by
it's
it.
a hell of a book. It's not the cover, it's an outstanding book.
Thank you.
You guys can hold your mics all the time and chime in, Yeah, feel free to.
But yeah, it was really like book talk that catapulted it to like a viral thing. And, a lot of people have a lot of opinions about it, and that's fine.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, so yeah.
Very cool. So no rolling your eyes at TikTok.
Yeah.
We all have to get on board with it.
Yeah.
Alma, how about you?
Well, let's see. I guess there's two phases. One is now I'm retired from the government, yay. And I do work as a consultant, but I can totally set my own hours there. So I have all the time I want, and it really helps that my family has learned that I'm like a rattlesnake, and you do not get in my way when I'm working. So I like literally get up first thing in the morning, make a cup of coffee, walk over to my office, which is separate from the house, and I'll just stay up there for hours. And we don't have any children, so that was really helpful too. So my husband will just text me if he needs me, right? Like he won't even come to the office and open the door. But before that, as I mentioned, I spent 10 years writing that first book, and I was still working. And I started shortly after 2000, which we can go into all that if you want to talk about hardship. But you all remember what happened in 2001 in September. And I was working on my book diligently, writing every day. Usually at night, I'd come home from work and, just go. I was telling people I just had like a desk set up in the guest bedroom of our house. And I would just go up there at night and, write a little bit. But for 9/11, I ended up going to the office of the Secretary of Defense to work on the Iraq War planning. And I worked from, I tell the story just because I want to show that, a lot of people say I have no time to write, and I'm kind of like a really hard ass. And so I say, well, if I could do it, you could do it. And I've been told this isn't a very sympathetic story.
No, this is what we need. We want to hear this.
I worked from 4 in the morning till 8 at night every day. And I lived an hour and a half away from the Pentagon. Luckily, at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's not a lot of traffic. So I had to make the trip. I would sleep literally for just a couple hours. I always made sure I wrote at least an hour every day working on this damn book that wouldn't be publishable for 8 more years. I'm not saying you have to have, and I've been told that's very unsympathetic, because some people literally, they have families, they have kids, they have people depending on them, and they can't write every day. And I'm getting to the place where I understand that. But I think for a lot of writers, writing is like muscle memory. And so the longer you're away from it, the harder it is to at least for me, it takes me like 2 or 3 days to get back in the flow of writing fiction again. Mm-hmm. And editing counts, but anyway, so I was just deathly afraid to stop writing. So I made sure that I wrote every day, even though I had this crazy ass job,
Yeah. Rachel?
I think to your point, routine is a really big part of it. Creating routine, creating good habits. Again, I'm type A, so this is type A advice of just doing it, for me, the same time every day. If you find a time where that works for you, for me, I get up at like 4:30 in the morning, and that's when I wrote my first 2 books. So, but some people write better after work. For me, I was too burnt out at the end of the day. So finding what time works for you and making it a habit. And I see what you're saying about the internship, but for me, I feel like you really have to write because you love to write and not writing to be like, well, I need to get this in a place where I can publish it. Because I feel like then when you hit a wall or a disappointment, it's easier to give up versus if you're in the headspace of I'm getting up at 4:30 in the morning because this is important to me and I have to do this to make myself happy. This is my creative outlet. I love it. If you don't have that, if you're just I need to get this book in shape to try and get an agent, and then you're on submission for 6 months and it's disappointing, I think you're more likely to kind of give up if you're in that headspace versus treating it more like a passion at first versus a job.
That's really good
I'm
advice.
curious if you guys feel the same way.
It's great. Yeah, for sure.
That's really good advice. And please do hold your microphones because, you're going to have valuable input when people say things. So I'd love it if you just chime in. But if you haven't found that sweet spot of the writing that you love to do, then that's a great reminder that you can find it. You can do that. Yeah, great. May?
Yeah, and I do think that's so important, because there's going to be many dark nights of the soul, and you don't know why you're doing this anymore. And if you do sort of base it on outward things, then you probably won't keep going. So you really have to love it. I know, like, a lot of people roll their eyes at Liz Gilbert, but I love her book Big Magic, because it really hammers that point home. And so I sometimes will pick that up and read it when I want to quit forever.
Oh, so that's helpful.
For me, I learned to write in small chunks of time. So if I have 15 minutes, I'll grab it, and maybe 15 minutes later that day, especially during the pandemic when, you know, we were all at the house together and I was under deadline. And it's amazing what you can write in 15 minutes. And then it stays in your subconscious. So maybe like if you're out on a walk and you know, bring up your notes on your iPad or iPhone or whatever, and you can dictate to yourself or write then. And then by the end of the day, you might have like a page or 2 or 3. And as long as it's in my brain, you know, and I can find just times to get to the, like, you'll have a novel in a year. And that's just still baffling to me how it adds up. So I'm a big proponent of telling people that, because I didn't know that for the longest time, and I was always like, oh, if I only had a residency, if I only had a cottage in the woods, then I would. And actually, when I have a bottomless time, I can be my own worst enemy, and I have to fight against, like, not like, you know, external forces, but like my own, like, oh, I think I'll just stay on Twitter all day. So yeah, and it kind of tricks my brain into unlocking, like, okay, you got 20 minutes, you got 30 minutes, an hour. It's like, okay, yes, I can go to the gym for 1 minute, but I won't go for an hour. Actually, I'll never even open the door. So.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, thank you. Gabino?
I think the first thing we have to talk about is the whole having time thing. I don't think anyone has time. I think we make time. And once you understand that difference, then you're ready to do sacrifices. Like, I can't find writing time, and then I look at them and I was like, you were binging Game of Thrones and you tweeted about it. So if you can binge an entire Netflix series, you don't have a problem finding time for that. So, you know, make time for the writing. Between 2012 and 2018, yes, I wrote and published 4 books, and during each one of those 4 books, I had at least 2 jobs. So for this one, I had 40,000 words. I was writing for NPR, teaching MFA classes at Southern New Hampshire University, and I was a full-time high school teacher at IDEA Montopolis in Austin. So I became very good at typing with one hand. During my lunch breaks, I would eat my sandwich and with one hand and type with my right, because I really thought, you know, I can sit here and listen to music or start grading or doing something else, but 30 minutes, May just said 15, if you can really focus and get work done in you know, 30 minutes, it adds up. You don't have to be a super fast typer, but if you do it every single day. So find those little sacred spots. And yeah, you know, everyone thought I was antisocial because I didn't talk to any other teachers. I was like there with my headphones on, just typing away about murder. It's not ideal, but you make it work. And then eventually, if you do that long enough, the goal is now I can have a mellow morning, and I know that if I organize my life well, which I'm not a type A, if I do somewhat of a nice job organizing my life, at some point between 10 a.m. and maybe 2 or 3 p.m. in the day, I'm going to have the opportunity to carve out time. So am I gonna take a nap, you know, read, because I love to read, or watch, you know, a horror movie? No, I'm gonna go write, because you have to make that time. So, yeah. And a lot of caffeine.
That is a clarion call, make the time. So let's open up to questions from the audience. I don't think we have a mic, but if you could raise your hand, and really speak loudly. If you could stand up for us. kind of research.
I think we have a mic.
Yes, it's coming. Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes. Okay. But that's good. We got it. The kind of research you do for your books.
Maybe I'll start because I write historical fiction. So I do a lot of research for my books. My books are historical and fantastical, have fairy tale elements, mythological elements, so a lot of everything, and I research each of those elements. When I started working on The Witch and the Tsar, my Baba Yaga retelling, I actually started with the fairy tales themselves, reading through them, then kind of choosing a time period that I wanted to set my novel, which was medieval Russia. So I read kind of more general research topics on medieval Russia, making it specific to the time of Ivan the Terrible, which is when my book is set. And then I sort of write. I outline, then write, and then in my head, I kind of have research that I want to tackle after I do that first draft. So I do about half my research before I start writing, and then write the first draft.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks, Eric.
And just, finish up when I have a better idea of what else I need.
Thank you. Eric, go ahead.
I mean, it depends on the book, whatever book I'm working on, but I mean, research could include just like reading books that inspire you, books that, authors that you really admire. I don't write like a lot of historical pieces, so, research doesn't play like a huge role. I know Alma writes a lot of historical, so maybe I'll just defer to her for this.
Sure. Thank you, Eric.
This is where I really nail it home that I am not a likable person, okay? I'll just warn you right now, because I am so opinionated about research, and I'll explain why. Besides writing historical fiction with horror elements, I was an intelligence analyst and for over 20 years. And that is basically, you are a research analyst. And it's a very strict discipline and you get a lot of training in it. So I just imagine if you're writing something for the president, you really have to know what you're talking about, right? So I have a really high, crazy standard. And then I went to work for RAND, the RAND Corporation, and I was a senior analyst for them. And I led huge research projects. And then I became the director of a research lab for the government. So I'm very opinionated on the subject, to the point where, when I wrote the first historical horror novel, which was The Hunger, which was about the Donner Party, people would come up to me all the time after events and ask for advice. And I could see very quickly that most people don't do research projects every day. Maybe the last one they did was in high school or college, and they really want to write this book, but they're paralyzed by the idea of doing the research. So I actually even developed a workshop on this, and it's not what you think of. I approached it like how we do it as a research analyst. And my tips are, number one is have a key question or a research question that you're going to do your research about, not something open-ended, because I think that really paralyzes a lot of people. I want to write a book about World War II. What should I write about? And then they just start researching all of World War II, which sounds like fun, I know, but it's going to take forever. Like one person came up to me at a conference and said, I have a friend who's been writing a book about ancient Rome for 10 years and she hasn't written one sentence. She's just doing research. And I said, guess what? She's not writing a book about ancient Rome. She's researching a book about ancient Rome. Anyway, so that's the main one. Don't walk in there thinking my research is going to tell me what my story should be. Have an idea of what you want to write about. And it's usually not the historical specific thing, usually. It's a love story. It's about these people. It's about this character. And then it's a matter of finding the point in history maybe that tells that story the best. But that's the first one. Second one has to, you really want me to go through all
No,
this?
if I may, I'll move on to Rachel,
Yes,
only
please
because we
do.
do have time restraints.
I'm
And
like,
if you don't
Google.
have anything,
I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what you're talking about.
yeah, follow Alma, please.
I write contemporary books, so for me, it was like, I think when I was writing my last book, I was like, are Camel Crush cigarettes still a thing? And then I have to Google that. So that's the extent of my research. So
But that's
this
great.
is like a shameful follow-up from you. But yeah,
It's a great
I'll
question.
defer now.
Yeah, go ahead. May, how about you?
I mean, thus far, like, my research is just basically the fact that I grew up in batshit crazy East Texas with very colorful characters and insane women. And so it's almost like autobiographical.
Yeah. No research at all. Gabino?
I'm a journalist by training, so anything that I put in my books that I haven't done personally, I have to research. Not like Alma to that level, but I do it. And my PhD was from an R1 institution, so they teach you how to do research. For this one, for example, I learned how to liquefy meth. It was also kind of like a plan B, like if the book didn't work out, I was gonna liquefy meth for a living. So please buy all of our books so we don't have to do that.
Yes, please do buy their books.
And also I learned very early on that gun people, there's good people that are gun people and bad people that are gun people, but if you make a mistake writing about a gun, they will send you hate mail. Like you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about. You put a safety on a Glock, you deserve to die. So if I'm talking about a gun, I spend a week, researching a gun because I want to make sure that I, short of being a gun owner for like 20 years, that the next best thing is doing research. And it's also the perfect question to put to rest the most stupid piece of advice they give writers, like write what you know. Don't do that. You don't know that much. That's maybe a novella. So go write about what you don't know, but research it first.
Can't you see him in the high school classroom?
That's the reason I got fired.
Did you get fired?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. You have another question here.
Yeah, I'm curious because, we're speaking about perseverance, about how to get to the finish line, but I'm curious about the other side of the finish line and how a lot of the authors on the panel they're publishing their third book, fourth book. How do you protect your voice in the din of feedback, both from the editorial side, the critical side, the Goodreads side? How do you as an author persevere to protect what is sacred to you now that you're kind of facing the world at large?
Oh, great question. Olesya, let's do the same thing. We'll go down.
It's working.
Magic.
Yeah, so I'm, publishing my first book, so I'm really learning that, and I can't really answer that question too much, but I did, I started getting the Goodreads reviews, obviously going through the editorial process with my editor, before that with my agent, and my husband said something to me the other day. I kind of was feeling very low, and I said, well, what's the point? Something like that. And he said, well, you have to think about why you started doing this, why you are writing these books, what you're trying to say with these books, and kind of drown out the rest. So I got a lot of inspiration from that with writing my second book, is really focusing on why I'm writing, specifically in such a difficult time period to write about Russia, is why I'm writing my books. And that's been really, really important to come back to, why I'm doing this, why I even started to do this, is I think really important.
And Olesya she does sensitivity reading. If you have a Slavic character in your book, she'll read to make sure that you've portrayed them well. Great. Eric?
I think I'm pretty new to all of this, so take what I say with like a grain of salt, but I think it's very important to have somebody in your corner that like respects what you do, understands what you do, and just supports you. So I'm lucky, like my boyfriend Ollie is here. He's like so supportive of me and just like protects me from all of the noise that's like around. He like scolds me for looking at Goodreads. Don't look at Goodreads reviews. Just don't. But yeah, like it's just, if you have that person in your life who is there for you and, just keeps you on the path of like why you're doing this, that's just so valuable. And, I'm very fortunate that I have like an amazing agent and a film and TV manager as well, that they're both like in my corner and so devoted to me and like, you know, guiding me throughout this process. But it really is like loved ones that, you know, have my back, I know.
Yeah.
And that is what protects me, I feel
Yeah,
like.
so seek that out. If you don't have it yet, it does exist. Seek it out. The library has great resources for that. Alma, do you have a problem keeping your voice?
Not at this stage, I think, but it's an important consideration when you're starting. And I think even when you get to like the first book stage, or sometimes even the second book stage, you know, when my first book, The Taker, it wasn't acquired yet, but I had an agent, and he said, you know, I don't know if any of you have ever read the book, it's pretty wacky, but he said, you know, when I got to the end and I found out that character, I really thought that this character, Adair, who's the villain, was really X. I don't want to give it away. And I'm like, I can't believe it. Did you, like, I didn't say it to him, I'm thinking, did you even read that book? There's no way I just spent 10 years writing this. I knew Adair was not X, and then I was like, whoa, this is what you wanted, right? You wanted a professional agent. You should at least take the weekend, because he told me this on a Friday, and think about what he said and whether or not it makes for a better book. And by Sunday, I was like, that is genius. Oh. Why didn't I think of that? And I swear to God, that has happened with every one of my 8 books. The agent or the editor, usually the editor at this point, sees something that I have missed, and it almost always requires me to rewrite the last third of the book. I just know it's coming now. And it makes you question, like, am I even a writer? How did I not see that coming? Anyway, it just takes a long time to develop like a confidence in your writing. And in the beginning, it's so hard because you get a lot of advice. You get advice from people. Before you have an agent and an editor, you get advice from other writers. And some of them are fine, but there is a lot of the blind leading the blind out there. And they may be giving you advice that's driven by emotional reasons why they're telling you something, and you really just have to develop that radar for knowing what advice to take and what advice to let go. And that's really, really hard. And it'll get better once you get an editor and an agent, they'll help you. But in the beginning, it can feel a little bit like you're getting blown around by the storm. I hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Rachel?
So I think it gets harder with every book because there's more feedback just coming from everywhere. And then there's the like, for me, there was a pressure of like, okay, well, what do I do next? And, you know, how do I improve? And how do I do this differently? And I like to challenge myself, but I think there's also that pressure and fear. And if that infiltrates into the craft, I think it's very evident. And I need to be having fun for it to be good. And so being able to strip away all of the pressure or however long you've been doing it, like, oh, well, now this is your 3rd book, and is it going to be the same as your first 2? Is it going to be different? Are the people who liked the first one, are they going to like this one? And kind of just being able to forget all of that and just sit down and have it just be you and your work. I found that's a challenge that came up for me recently where it was too in my head, and I had to kind of like, okay, back to basics.
So did you sit down and give yourself a talking to?
Kind of. But I have a wonderful agent too who was able to be like, where's your voice in this? And then be like, you're right, and come back to it. And so I do think having that, you know, person that you trust who knows you and knows your voice and who's your champion is so important. Who do you trust who's in your corner who can kind of be like, what's going on here? Because sometimes you can sense it's happening, but you're so lost in the panic or fog that you don't really know until someone calls it out.
Right, and it's okay if somebody else calls it out, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as long as it's somebody that you trust,
say
you
it
know, and
nicely.
you're like, you
Yes.
know me, you know that this is,
Yes.
you know, finding the right person because, you know, you can have people who, you know, give you feedback for the wrong reasons, or I think we were talking last night during the keynote, they were talking about, he said something so smart about it, about like brutal honesty versus constructive honesty. I think, you know, knowing who you can go to for help when something like this comes up is invaluable.
That's such a great point. Thank you. May?
Yeah, that's a really great answer. And all y'all's are, I don't know what I do, like, because I'm with you. I find that, you know, I just wrote my 4th book and I'm about to start on the 5th, and I think it's gotten harder to keep the voices out and maintain that, you know, that sort of magical, mysterious thing that happens when you write, because, yeah, and I also think, like, so I do work with a freelance developmental editor now with each of my books, and she really helps me get out of my head. Like, you know, I don't let anyone in like the first 50 pages, but she's like, you need to write them though. And she will help, like, you've got this, you're doing this. And also my husband is, you know, get in there and write. But he's often like, what do you mean? It's a story. You know how to tell stories. You've got, and he really brings it back to basics, and that's so helpful, because it is so easy to just let everything, the business and the noise and the BS get in your brain, and you're like, who am I writing for? What am I doing? So yeah, as long as it's fun and you can feel the story, like, that's the most important thing.
Thank you so much for mentioning developmental editors and the unsung heroes of fiction. So talk to us later about that if you'd want to. Gabino?
Every event I do, I'm like, I pray to the Orishas before I walk in. I'm like, let them not ask a question that will make them regret giving me a microphone. And it always comes.
It wasn't my question.
So here we go. Number 1, the national treasure Joe Lansdale told me 15 years ago, write like everyone you know is dead. And I've been doing that. Second, Goodreads and Amazon reviews, and even like Kirkus and everything else, even the New York Times, if you're lucky enough, they review your book. That's for readers. It's not for you, all right? So I know it's tricky, I know it's hard, but we have to teach ourselves to stay away from that. Once you put a book out into the world, it belongs to readers. People buy it, people read it, they have opinions, and that's fine. And third, remember who you are and why you do things, because everyone and their dog has an opinion. So keep it in mind. You don't like LGBTQ weddings? Don't have a gay wedding. You don't like abortions? Don't get one. All right? So apply that to your writing. You don't like the Spanish? I say thank you. I'm thinking, I hope your socks get wet today. But, you know, I don't say that. Your book is too violent and it's too horrific. I'm like, thank you. I'm thinking, go read the nutrition facts on bottled water. But don't say those things. Don't engage. Don't let the rage take over and then everything gets red. Don't do that. It's not for you. You keep doing your thing, and you know, those people don't, you know, they don't live with you. They don't, they're not your husband or your kid or your wife or your boyfriend or anybody else. So train yourself to be as callous as possible. There's a reason why you're doing that, and it's because you have these stories inside of you that if you don't write them, you will burst. And that's what you do it. You don't do it for, you know, everybody on Goodreads with a keyboard and an opinion. So take that as you will.
That's great. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you. That really has been so helpful. We are at the witching hour. Alex, I believe we have to stop now, right?
I think we, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I saw a hand.
So question, are you going to write all your writing advice into a book so we can buy and read?
But I would run out of Twitter content if I did, so I don't know, maybe.
Okay, so please give our panel a great big round of applause. Thank you so much. That was really fantastic. That was wonderful. Okay, thank you. And we'll be available for questions if you'd like to come and chat.
Oh, we need a picture.
Yeah, definitely.
We need a very